Welcome back once again to Ramblings from the Rectory. As you can see, I'm in the kitchen today, and by the end of the program, you'll see that there's a method to my madness. Yesterday was great news for the Archdiocese of St. Louis as we received the announcement of our new Archbishop, Bishop Mitchell Radowski. I was very, very impressed, and I'm very, very happy and excited. His press conference, if you didn't see it, you can go on YouTube. He just seems to be a man of great faith, also a sense of humor, and definitely with people. The two things that really impressed me as he was talking the other day was, first of all, that they asked him about his leadership style, and he said basically it's the fact that I am first and foremost a parish priest. The happiest days of my life were being the pastor of a parish, and actually the life of the church is lived at a parish level. He's a man who comes to us by way of Springfield, by way of Baltimore. He was born and bred in Baltimore, and there's a connection between us and Baltimore as far as the Archdiocese is concerned, is that when Peter Richard Kenrick was the Archbishop of St. Louis, his brother, Francis Patrick Kenrick, was the Archbishop of Philadelphia, and then was ultimately moved to the Archdiocese of Baltimore. The Archdiocese of Baltimore is the oldest in the United States. It's the primatial see, and it was originally the see of John Carroll of Carrollton, whose brother also signed the Declaration of Independence. So he has deep roots, not just as an American, but also as a Roman Catholic. The second thing that I thought was really humorous is he was asked about his family. His parents are both still living, his mother and father. He also has two brothers. He's one of three boys. And they asked him about his parents, and he says, well, on the way to St. Louis the other day, I stopped and saw them in Baltimore. And my mother and my father are parents and their parents and their parents, and parents never change. And my mother said to me, when I told her I was going to be the Archbishop of St. Louis, told me the same thing that she told me when I was made an auxiliary bishop of Baltimore. And when I was made the ordinary in Springfield, and now that I'm the Archbishop of St. Louis, she said, don't get a big head. The man's got a great sense of humor about himself, especially. He also is one who likes to actually walk the streets and talk to people, as he said he did in Springfield. So I can imagine that he'll be walking around the West End, talking to people on the street and asking them different questions and their observations. Talking to another bishop that I know pretty well, he says that the man is a person who loves to listen. He loves to listen to people. He loves to hear people's stories. So I think we're in for a great, great time. I also think we are been very blessed with Bishop Carlson. He's been a man who I've never heard give a bad homily, and I've always been impressed by his kindness, his warmth, and his hospitality. Not to mention the fact that he sent me here. So good luck to him in his retirement, and keep him in your prayers. Speaking of prayers, yesterday we lost another priest of the diocese, Father Tim Vowles. His last assignment had been the pastor of Incarnate Word. A great guy. He was actually 3 years younger than I. We met in the seminary when he was first-year theologian. He also was a fantastic organist. He played in my first Mass. He suffered the past 3 years terribly with cancer and other complications of illness. God rest his soul, and may he rest in peace. We also got word of the fact that last week, Father John J. Hughes also died. He was here, if you'll remember, on the very first evening of Lent when we had the Masses with the guest celebrants, inviting the old pastors, or should I say former pastors and associates back. He had a delightful time that night. He was here for dinner, and he was just very excited to be back here. He had been a pastor here for a few years before, I think, Father Griesedek. Father Griesedek also is ill at this time, but I think doing pretty well. But keep him in your prayers also. Today we say goodbye to the sisters of St. Francis of the Martyr of St. George. It's a sad day because of the 23 years of service that they have given to our parish, especially by their witness and their teaching in our school. We wish them all a very, very fond farewell, and also we will keep them in our prayers, especially as they begin their new assignments and as they actually open up some new apostolates. We were going to have something, in fact, next week, but unfortunately, because we cannot do anything at this particular time, we're going to try to hold off everything until August, when we hope to invite all of the sisters that ever served here back for a mass and also a party afterwards. And at that time, if not beforehand, we have a new statue of St. Francis of Assisi that we're going to dedicate in memory of their service here, and it will be on the side of the church between the rectory and the statue of Our Lady of the Streets. This past week has been a wild time here. We've had graduation, we've had 2 confirmations, and it was all about the youth of the parish. And I was telling them that what they've experienced in the past 5 months as young people, and we also being part of American history at this particular time, actually is 100 years of history rolled into just a few months. You can think in terms of the 1918 epidemic that we had. My grandparents and my father and mother lived through that. Not to mention the 30s, the crash of 29 with the great economic unrest. And then personally living through the riots in the streets of many of our cities in the 60s and the 70s over racial inequality and also over the Vietnam War. I think the important thing to remember is that even that was over 100 years in its happening, we got through it. And we'll get through it again because of the fact that that's what Christians and Americans do. And they actually come up stronger and better because of it. The other day I was in the car listening to the radio when I was doing some errands. And it was just at the right time, at the right place, because of everything that's happening. Because we can get disheartened and wonder, what's happening to the world, what's happening to our country. And what I would suggest to you is go on YouTube and put in Aaron Copland, a Lincoln portrait. Aaron Copland is known as the Dean of American Composition. He probably is not as well known among everybody as the Gershwins are, but he influenced in more ways than one the whole American scene of music and really came up with an American sound. He was a great influence also on Leonard Bernstein. He also wrote Appalachian Spring, Fanfare for the Common Man. He has a magnificent first symphony that is also with orchestra and organ. It was kind of interesting that at the age of 30 he composed this, and one critic said, if a man writes this at this age, he will probably commit suicide before he is 33. Interesting comment on his very first work, where now all of a sudden he is held in such high esteem. There's many, many versions of a Lincoln portrait. A Lincoln portrait actually is orchestrated by and written by Aaron Copland. The big emphasis is the brass section, and it is read parts of Carl Sandburg's biography and description of Lincoln, and then it's interspersed with addresses of and letters from President Lincoln, ending with part of the Gettysburg Address. I think if you listen to it, you'll find it just inspirational. It should give you goosebumps. It brought tears to my eyes. The one I heard was with, I think it was Pierre Boulez and the Los Angeles Symphony Orchestra, and Gregory Peck was the one who was reading it. But I think there's one with Leonard Bernstein, and it actually is James Earl Jones that is reading it. But I would ask you to think about that. Speaking of Lincoln, this past week I had the great opportunity of being up with one of my classmates, and he had taped a great program on Channel 9. It was about the history of Ulysses S. Grant, who became President of the United States, who also was the great Civil War general. But the interesting part is some of the early years of his life and his big connection with St. Louis itself, St. Louis, Missouri. I would recommend that to you for a little TV watching, and it's very worthwhile. Finally, you're probably wondering why we're in the kitchen. Well, it's tomato season, and there's nothing better than Missouri tomatoes, whether you buy them in the store or whether you're growing your own. I've got 2 big flower buckets out by the garage. They're starting to ripen, kind of getting excited. But tomatoes, always for me, is caprese salads. And so today I thought of giving you just a great recipe for caprese salad. And it's just a question of building. It's always kind of fun building blocks. Start with a nice bed of mixed greens, and then sliced tomatoes with mozzarella in between them. And then garnish it with some pepperoncinis, some Kalamata olives, and maybe some cherry peppers. And then the tradition is usually to then take ribbons of basil, or they would say chiffonade basil, and red wine vinegar and olive oil, good olive oil. It just so happens that pepperoncinis, cherries. If you really want to make a nice dressing because you don't have any fresh basil, and you just don't like necessarily red wine, vinegar, and olive oil, I would suggest Dierbergs or Schnucks. It's called basil stir-in paste. You find it in the vegetable section, and it is concentrated basil. 1 tablespoon of this mixed with about a third of a cup of champagne vinegar, and then good olive oil. You want to use good olive oil for salad dressing. You don't need to necessarily use good olive oil when cooking, but you really want to get good olive oil. It's kind of like cooking with wine. If you don't want to drink the wine, don't cook with it. The same thing is true with olive oil. So that's my little recipe for today, and hope everybody's doing well. And just to let you see, this is what it'll all look like. So, bon appetito. Peace, love, and joy. God bless. See you next time.